Well, I want to welcome all our listeners out there to another edition of the DC Capstone Report. It's great to be coming to you today with our podcast. Today on the podcast, we're going to look at our first segment at a review of the game against Louisville. In our second segment, we're going to look at some outstanding players that may have been standouts in the game that had a really good game for the University of Alabama. And finally, in our final third segment, we're going to look at the upcoming game against the Arkansas State Red Wolves.
You've been listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on Tide 102.9, The Morning Blitz with Martin Houston. You can listen live at Tide1029.com.
Well, Lance, to all of our podcast listeners out there, we're glad to be back for another segment of DC Capstone Report. And just reviewing in this first segment today, the game against Louisville. I just want to thank all of our loyal listeners and our fans out there who've been listening in, who have given us appreciation for the live broadcast we were able to do during the game on Facebook Live. We're going to try to do that from time to time. We appreciate your input on that, for being able to see things like the run on the field, the band, and the national anthem that maybe you not get to see it on the TV screen. So it's really good for us to highlight those things, to give our listeners out there an opportunity to see what's going on live in the games. When we have opportunity to do that, we'll come back at some of the other games live as well. Well, just get to a quick review of the game. You know, in the podcast leading up to the first game, we talked about what Alabama had to do to gel, come together, and make an impact in this game. And I think we were spot on, Lance, on our analysis. It looked like that Alabama established the pass with a good running game and some good play calling. And it looked like they were able to exploit the defensive backs down the field with our great playmakers. But also, we cautioned about some things in our earlier podcast, and one of those was mental errors and mistakes. And we saw that come up in our lack of attention to detail on some plays. Also, in the way we carried the ball, we spotlighted early on a few podcasts back about how they were going to try to strip the ball from our playmakers, and they did that on a couple of occasions where we lost the ball. And also, we made some mental errors in the penalties we shouldn't have made that cost us some touchdowns. And in our kicking game, we had a couple of breakdowns where we got penalties, and we also missed an extra point and missed a field goal. So there were some things we did really good on offense and some things that we could work on. I think our defense showed up and played well in the game. I think we held Louisville rushing a game to less than a yard per carry. I think they got 0.6 of a yard per carry on 28 carries, so they averaged less than 16 yards a game for the rushing defense. So our defense was really well. They did try to exploit our young defensive backs by throwing downfield, but it looked like to me they held their own in most instances, held their own. When the second team was in there late in the game, they got a touchdown pass that was kind of just a misplay. A couple of times we also saw a misdirection cause our defensive backs to lose focus. And when, as Coach Saban alluded to in his post-game press conference, when you see one of their players running open, and we saw that about 3 or 4 times where one of their wide receivers running wide open and catching the ball, that means there was a mental breakdown by an individual player who just missed the play, busted the play. So we've got to work on that coming up as well. On defense, though, I thought our defensive line played well. I think our linebackers played well. I noticed that Mac Wilson got dinged up a bit in this game. He played a tremendous game. He called a good game on the field. I do believe that his injury was minor. Coach Saban said there wasn't any major injuries to report coming out of the game. So people got dinged up, and he was one of those that got dinged up. But it looks to me like we're going to be solid at defensive line. We're going to be solid at the linebackers. Even his getting dinged up a bit allowed Markel Benton and Josh McMillan to come in and catch some playing time, and that'll be valuable to them down the road. So I think as far as our outside linebackers, our defensive line, and our middle linebackers, they got a good wealth of experience in this game that'll do us well down the road. Now, defensive backs played well. I think the freshman Patrick Surtain got in the game, did a good job. Savion Smith did well on the outside. All of them did well. I think the interceptions that Deontay Thompson had he has great ball skills, no doubt. And I think Shyam Carter had a couple of great plays where he was one-on-one matchups across the middle with the slot receiver, and then he also was able to play play a ball and get an interception and run it back for a pick six. So I think those are important to see our defense gelling. On offense, I think we had a good offensive showing. It took a little bit, in my opinion, for the offensive line to gel. But after a couple of series, they began to gel and get some better blocking. I think early on the running game was a little tough running. We did gain some yards in it, but we came on late in the first quarter and on into the first and second half to really blow up some holes, and having over 220 yards rushing was a good game, I believe, for our rushing attack. And we played multiple running backs in this game. Damian Harris got the start. Josh Jacobs came in and did a great job. Najee Harris played well. Brian Robinson played well. The freshman Jerome Ford got in. Looks like the plan for him is to play this year. He came in and got some valuable reps. And, of course, under the new redshirt rule, he can play up to 4 games and still get a redshirt. But he got in and got some reps. And then, of course, the redshirt senior, Ronnie Clark, is still on the team. Seems like Ronnie's been here a long time. He got some playing time late in the game and was able to run the ball. They had a lot of running backs that run well. Tua got the start. Coach Saban said at the outset of his press conference, post-game press conference, it was a plan all along. He had told the quarterbacks on Thursday the plan was to start Tua, get him about 20 reps, and then bring Jalen in and get approximately the same amount of reps, and then work Tua in some 2-minute offensive skill drills, so that at the end of the quarters or end of the halves, he would be able to work on a 2-minute drill because he hadn't had that experience, and that's exactly how it played out in the game. Tua did a great job. He showed he has a great passing ability, and he has a great running ability as well. One thing that Tua did in this game, I think, that shows one of the reasons that he's starting over Jalen is I think they're both great players, both with great skill sets, both athletic. But Tua's ability when he's getting pressured, and early in this game he got pressured while our offensive line was trying to gel. He got pressured a lot. His ability to escape that pressure and keep his eyes down the field to look for open receivers proved well on the very first touchdown pass to Jerry Jeudy, who I believe stepped up in this game. Tua did just that. He eluded the rush. He was pressured. He kept his eyes downfield. He saw Jeudy breaking up in the corner of the end zone. The defensive back's eyes were looking at Jeudy, not looking at the quarterback. As a matter of fact, I think he thought he was sacked. He threw the ball in, and Jeudy made a touchdown pass. That type of pass is the reason I believe that Tua is starting and playing over Jalen. But overall, I think the offense did well. We made some mistakes and mental errors that need to be corrected. Our special teams, I was happy with our return game. Jalen Waddle did an excellent job, but we did make some mistakes. And it takes a full team when you're blocking and do your assignment, not make dumb mistakes. And I believe it was Josh McMillan who made the block in the back that didn't need to be made. The block didn't need to be made. The touchdown was already scored. Waddle was running open and free when he made that block in the back to call that punt return back. But Jalen Waddle did a great job returning kicks, and he played some on offense as well, and caught a great pass downfield a couple of times. So I think he is someone we talked about in our leading up to the game podcast, and I think he did a good job in this game. So overall, I think Alabama played well. They got some things to work on going into the next game, and they got opportunities to correct some things. And I think you'll see those corrected before we get into the next game.
You have been listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by RollTideBama.com and FreelancePictures.com.
Well, Lance, on our second segment, I want to highlight, we always try to highlight some players that we thought were standouts in the game. And first, we're going to have to just talk about Tua. Tua, I thought, was a standout in this game. He did a great job, as I alluded to in the first segment, about his escapability. But also, he did a great job in putting the ball in tight spaces where it needed to be, away from defenders, not having to throw an interception. He did carry the ball loosely. I think that's something Coach Saban said he's going to have to work on. He was down. The ground caused the fumble, but he was carrying it loosely, and it could be knocked out of his hands. So I think that's something they'll work on between the first game and the second game, is ball security. That's something that we talked about last week for all of our skilled players. But Tua, I think, did a great job. He grabbed passing. He had some rushing touchdowns as well. And I think overall he had a real solid game. Another standout on offense is Jerry Jeudy. I talked to our listeners in an earlier podcast about him stepping up in the fall camp, and he just stepped up his game, did really good, had some good catches. He was open a couple of other times and just got missed when Jalen missed him on a deep ball he was open on. But he just really looked well in this game. I think he has really upped his game and looked for some great things out of Jerry Jeudy. You know, one of the things I said on the last podcast that got picked up in Texas was some of the reasons these sophomore receivers having to pick up their game is that young kid out of Texas, Jalen Waddle, was nipping at their heels. And yes, he showed what everybody has been seeing in the practices and what everybody saw in the scrimmages and related to me. He is one of the fastest players, and he has not only fast, but he's quick. He's quick off the line of scrimmage, and he has that open field speed that can run away from you. He showed that in his return game on special teams, and he showed that getting open downfield. He adds a different dynamic, another threat down the field. So I think another player on offense that was really a standout had to be Jalen Waddle. He's our freshman standout of the week. So going over to the defensive side of the ball, I think we could name a lot of people on defense, players that stepped up, but I'll have to give the two standout this week to Mack Wilson, who called a good game. Defensive linebacker did a real good job of relaying the signals and getting us in the right defenses at the right times. He was able to stop some passing plays, some running plays, and he made some great hits that kind of pumped up the defense. So he got nicked up in this game, but Coach Saban said it was nothing that could keep him out of the game. They looked for him to be back full speed during practice this week, barring any other injuries. So Mack Wilson really played well in this game. On another standout defensive player had to be the two in the defensive backfield that I want to highlight. One is Deontay Thompson. He's the returning defensive safety that has the most experience. He had 3 games under his belt going into this game as a starter. He showed it well in this game. He has great ball skills. He had a great interception in the end zone that stopped a touchdown pass from Juwan Pass, the quarterback of Louisville. He did a good job reading his eyes, going toward the ball and closing speed to catch that ball. Other times he had some great safety run help when he came up and stopped the run. So I think Deontay Thompson was definitely a standout on defense. The other defensive back that I think was a standout was Shyam Carter. Shyam Carter, number 5, if you're watching him play, he did such a great job on several plays that didn't get the credit, where he had his man covered and just they couldn't go to that man. Then there was a couple of plays where he just knocked the ball right out of the midair, right in front of the player who was about to catch it. And then he also had that pick 6 and he ran it back for a touchdown. So I think Shyam Carter is another one on defense that did a great job. Well, the freshman defensive player that I thought had a good game was Patrick Surtain. We talked about him in our pregame podcast leading up to this game, how he's a freshman. He could come in and contribute. He contributed early. He played often. And Coach Saban said that he's true playing at corner, and maybe asked him to do too much to play in that money spot, that star spot. I thought it was interesting. We saw Trayvon Diggs move over and play that star spot a couple of times and did such a great job. So look for maybe Patrick Surtain to swap out and go out to corner, and Diggs come in and play that star spot that Minkah Fitzpatrick made made such a great job playing last year. So those are my players, standout players on offense and defense this week for the Louisville game. Well, Lance, in their final segment, we want to look forward to the upcoming game. We got a game coming up this week, our first home game in Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're going to play against Arkansas State, the Red Wolves. You know, the Arkansas State is no pushover, no slouch. There's a lot of these teams where you think they're coming in and they're a gimme team or a cupcake team. They're not a cupcake. I heard one of the ESPN announcers talking this week saying that you could gag on a cupcake, and you definitely could. Penn State showed this last week you should never underestimate the play of a team that you got coming in to play you that's supposed to be a win for you. Appalachian State, in the 10th anniversary of their big win over Michigan, went into Happy Valley at Penn State and almost pulled an upset. They missed a field goal in overtime that would have missed a field goal to keep it from going to overtime that would have beat Penn State. So we can't take this Arkansas State team lightly that's coming into Bryant-Denny Stadium. We all need to show up. All our fans need to be there to be our first home game. I think there's still some tickets available. I encourage everyone to get out and bring your family to Tuscaloosa to enjoy the opening game. This last week against Arkansas State, they won handily against Southeast Missouri State, 48-21. So they have a high-powered offense. This is the Arkansas State is where we've had some people like Gus Malzahn, Hugh Freeze, other high-powered offensive minds come out and be coaching there at one time. So they have another coach now that's carrying on that offensive mentality. So they're going to try to score some points against Alabama. Alabama's job in this game, what we need to do is to correct the mistakes that we made in this past game, learn from our mistakes. So I think our game plan for this game is to keep doing what we're doing on offense and keep doing what we're doing on defense, but correct the mistakes that I know are correctable. And in my opinion, Lance, the first thing we need to correct are these mental errors that cost us dearly when we have the ball, and that is carrying the ball too loosely and not securing the ball. I believe if anyone watches the film, several times that Louisville could have had other fumbles if we had if they had hit the ball the right time while we were carrying it loosely. So we've got to be careful. We've got to correct our fumbles. We've got to correct our mental mistakes in carrying the ball. The second thing we got to correct is our mental errors, and our mental errors that come with making bad mistakes on penalties. We had several penalties in this game that cost us dearly on field position. It cost us on defense when we made stupid penalties that extended their drives. We had them in third down situations where we would have got the ball back, and yet we extended the drives. We can't do that in against teams that can take advantage of us offensively and score points. We've got to correct these mental mistakes that cost us extending drives for the other team. The other time that it costs us is making mental mistakes that we should not make by making penalties when we have the ball and doing something good that brings things back, like touchdowns. In this game, we had a mental error made, a block in the back that was made on a beautiful punt return by Jalen Waddle. I thought he did a great job of returning the punt for a touchdown, but yet we had a player who had a block in the back that didn't need to be made. The block didn't need to be made. The Waddle was on past him and on his way to score a touchdown when the block was made. So we've got to erase those mental mistakes and penalties in order to improve from our first game to our second game. And finally, the third thing is when we're faced with opportunities to play, our second team that came in made some mental errors and just blown coverages. We can't have wide receivers running wide open across the field, and that we can be exploited when wide receivers from the other team are running wide open across the field. So I believe that's three areas we can correct: our mental mistakes on fumbles and turnovers, our mental mistakes for making penalties that either extend drives for the other team or stop drives for us or stop points for us. And third, correct the mistakes that when we have wide receivers from the opposing team running wide open in the secondary. Lance, I think we do that. Then we're going to come out of this game and do well against Arkansas State. With that being said, I think we're going to have a really good game. I think we're going to have a good game offensively. I think it'll be a first-time home showing that our team will be pumped up and ready to play. And I look for us to win this game 52-7.
You have been listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is brought to you each time this week by RollTideBama.com and FreelancePictures.com. Be sure to go online and check us out on DCCapstoneReport.com for future updates.